Brief History of Dutch and Spanish Formosa, 1624 to 1662.
The Dutch East India Company, VOC, entered the South China Sea to challenge Iberian trade monopolies. After failing to seize Macau in 1622, the Dutch turned their sights toward the Pescadores. Commander Ryerson occupied the islands to blockade Chinese trade and force commercial concessions. The Dutch used forced Chinese labor to construct a massive stone fort on the islands. Harsh conditions and minimal food rations led to a catastrophic death toll among the workers. Approximately 1,300 of the 1,500 enslaved laborers died during the fort's construction. Aggressive Dutch posturing provoked a massive military response from the Ming Empire.
Admiral Yu Zhigao led a fleet of 200 warships and 10,000 troops to besiege the Dutch.
Facing overwhelming numbers, the Dutch were forced to negotiate their departure. Pirate merchant Lee Dan mediated the withdrawal, suggesting the Dutch relocate to Formosa. The Dutch agreed to leave the Pescadores as Taiwan lay outside Ming administrative boundaries. In 1624, the Dutch landed at Taiyuan, beginning their formal colonization of Taiwan. Governor Martin Sonck led the first Dutch settlers onto the southwestern peninsula. The island was home to Austronesian societies and transient Han traders before Dutch arrival. The VOC prioritized defense, initially building wooden palisades for immediate protection. These early structures were soon replaced by the massive stone walls of Fort Zeelandia. Salvador Diaz, a captive translator, gained the trust of the Dutch leadership. While serving as a confidant, Diaz systematically recorded Dutch military and commercial secrets. He identified the colony's porous intelligence and its many strategic vulnerabilities. Diaz noted the low morale of the soldiers and the hostility of nearby tribes. In 1626, Diaz fled to Macau in a small junk to deliver his findings. He provided the Portuguese with a detailed map of the young colony's weaknesses. Despite leaks, Zeelandia grew into a formidable bastion of the Old Netherlands system. Across the bay, Fort Provincia was established to secure the fertile Sekam plains. To gain a foothold, the VOC allied with the Sinkin, a small Saraya village. This alliance alienated powerful regional rivals, specifically the village of Matau. Emboldened by Dutch setbacks, Matau warriors began raiding Sinkin territory. Doubting Dutch protection, Sinkin villagers sought help from Japanese traders. A Sinkin delegation traveled to Japan, offering sovereignty to the shogun for protection. Governor Neutz refused their demands and imprisoned the returning delegation. In 1629, Japanese traders took Neutz hostage until the Sinkiners were released. Neutz later sent 63 musketeers to Matau to investigate rumors of pirates. Finding no pirates, the soldiers accepted a deceptive feast from the villagers. On their return, the soldiers waded across a river, unable to use their firearms. Indigenous warriors ambushed the vulnerable soldiers in the water. 60 Dutch soldiers were slaughtered, severely damaging colonial authority.
In 1635, massive military reinforcements arrived from Batavia to restore order. Governor Putmans launched a decisive campaign to pacify the defiant tribes. Dutch forces executed a surprise night assault, burning Matau to the ground. The display of force shattered resistance, ushering in the Pax Hollandica. The Dutch then targeted Lamey Island to punish the massacre of Dutch crews. Governor General Brouwer ordered the soldiers to punish and exterminate the islanders. The population fled into a large coral cave to escape the Dutch assault. Rather than entering, the Dutch soldiers began sealing the cave's exits. They placed burning pitch and sulfur at the vents to smoke out the refugees. Poisonous fumes were forced into the cave for 8 continuous days. Soldiers eventually found 300 suffocated men, women, and children inside. Survivors were deported and enslaved, leaving the island depopulated by 1645.
In 1626, the Spanish established a northern outpost to counter the Dutch. They built Fort San Salvador in Keelung to protect trade routes to Manila. The Spanish traded with the Basai people for gold, sulfur, and deerskins. Dominican missionaries arrived to Christianize and pacify the northern tribes. The colony struggled financially, often lacking the silver to buy Chinese goods. Hostile interior tribes frequently resisted, killing several Spanish missionaries. Facing a silver dearth, the Spanish began downsizing their Formosan garrisons. By 1642, the remaining Keelung garrison was isolated and under-resourced. Seeing Spanish weakness, Governor Traudinius launched a large invasion fleet. Dutch forces successfully seized the high ground overlooking the Spanish fort. From the hilltop, Dutch artillery battered the main fortress of San Salvador. Governor Portillo surrendered in August 1642, ending the Spanish presence.
Georgius Candidius became the first missionary to live among the indigenous people. Robertus Junius expanded this work, establishing the island's first schools. Children were taught to read and write their language using a Roman alphabet. Missionaries suppressed traditional customs and destroyed indigenous idols. By 1643, Junius had baptized over 5,400 indigenous adults. The Landdag was an annual assembly used to manage indigenous populations. It evolved into an orchestrated ritual of colonial submission and vassalage. Chieftains were presented with velvet capes and silver-tipped staffs. These items symbolized the chief's authority and allegiance to the VOC. In return, elders gave the governor soil, symbolizing territorial surrender. The VOC used these rituals to integrate hundreds of disparate villages. This system provided the VOC with legal arbitration and labor recruitment. The VOC implemented an aggressive tax regime, including a monthly head tax. Corrupt soldiers used tax inspections as a pretext to rob Han farmers. Farmer Guo Huai organized a rebellion of thousands of disgruntled laborers. Impoverished workers prepared for an uprising against Dutch extortion. Wealthy Chinese merchants betrayed the plot, warning the governor in advance. 15,000 rebels attacked Sacum, but the Dutch barricaded themselves in. Defenders held off the assault from the safety of masonry buildings. Governor Verburg dispatched 120 musketeers to crush the peasant army. Disciplined musket volleys easily broke the massed rebel lines. Guo Huai was shot and killed during the initial Dutch counterattack. Indigenous allies then hunted down and killed 4,000 fleeing rebels. Guo's head was displayed on a spike as a warning to the population. In 1654, a plague of locusts was seen as a divine omen of doom. Koxinga, a Ming loyalist, launched an invasion with 25,000 troops. Defector He Tingbin provided maps of the shallow channels near the fort. Koxinga's fleet navigated a secret channel to catch the Dutch by surprise. The primary Dutch warship Hector exploded during the initial naval clash. Minister Hambrook heroically urged the garrison to resist, despite his captivity. Disease and starvation ravaged both sides during the 9-month siege. Koxinga focused his artillery on the key hilltop Utrecht bastion. Once Utrecht fell, Koxinga could fire directly into Fort Zeelandia. Realizing the situation was futile, Governor Coyet finally surrendered. On February 1, 1662, the treaty ending Dutch rule was signed. The Dutch departed, and Taiwan was incorporated into the Chinese sphere.